Hi folks, it's Rob Flux here from Property Developer Network, coming to you for another Sunday session. This Sunday session is very different to our usual ones. We're actually celebrating our 8th birthday at Property Developer Network. And so what we thought we would do is get some of our illustrious network to come and get interrogated by you all, and we can find that follow their journey and how they started, where they are now, some of the I guess the ups and the downs along the way. So this is the Real Deal All Stars. So with that said, our Real Deal All Stars are Rod Dashavisi, Jim Valerie, Helen Foreman, and Al Campbell. So feel free to unmute yourselves, folks, and say hello to the crowd.
Hey everyone, how you doing?
Hey everyone.
Hello. So this is just going to be a chat and talk about, I guess, your journey and how it started and the like. And each of you have got a different story to tell. I know all of you very, very well, having hung around with you through watching your projects, turning up to our events, and just generally sharing a beverage or two at the end of our events, which is always greatly appreciated. Now, Rod, you and I go way back since before property.
About a decade, I think.
You're actually an ex-IT person, similar to myself.
Yeah.
And we used to turn up to IT events, and you were the competition, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought it was odd because I kept going to Hitachi Data System and Dell events and all these other things, and I'd often see this other guy, looks a bit like me, a bit bald, in the car park, and it was you, Rob, and I didn't really understand what was going on, but you just started turning up everywhere at the same time, and then later on bump into each other in property. So.
Absolutely, and so very, very similar journey and trajectory and the like. So yeah, and Al, I guess go to you next, mate. You were one of the early starters in our network, and I remember you at, I guess, when we were running events in the Brisbane City Library, and you were recalling a message the other day where there were only kind of 10 people in the room at one of the events that you turned up at, and that's way back at the start.
Yeah, I always remember turning up to those sessions. There'd be kind of 8-10 people in the meeting in the library, and I used to think back at the time, why does this guy keep doing this? Why does he keep turning up? And I suppose even way back then, what I loved about your sessions over other sessions, that similar kind of sessions, was you shared so much. It was always great content that was being provided, and there was no looking for something in return. You know, I used to go to some other sessions that it just seemed to be a sponsorship event for suppliers that would roll out the same projects over and over again, whereas you just over the years provided such great content. And
thank you, mate. I appreciate
just
that.
given so much over the years.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate that. So I'll ask you the question then. So you were thinking, why is this guy crazy enough to do this? Why were you crazy enough to come?
Well, at that stage, I had 3 young kids, and at that stage, I had become a full-time developer. My wife had gone back to work, so I was juggling managing 3 kids at home as a stay-at-home dad and being an early-stage developer. So the excuse to actually get out the house and escape 3 kids, it was one of the highlights of my month, getting out to come to your event, and it was an excuse to go for a drink afterwards.
And that's one of the, I guess, somewhat claims to fame for our events is the networking side of things is, you know, not a 5-minute handshake and swap a business card, but it's actually hanging around with your peers at the end, sharing a beverage or two, and getting to know people really, really well, and actually getting to know your peers. I've found that that's been one of the successes in our group. I like to think of it as a drinking club with a property problem.
Well, I certainly appreciate hanging around afterwards for the networking and the drinks. Yes. And yeah, I can't say it hurts to have a drink or two with new friends.
Well, in moderation, Rod, in moderation, mate.
Always, mate, always. It's never got out of hand.
Sorry, what was that?
It's never got out of hand.
No.
What,
Or
when you were there?
never with evidence anyway. Jimbo, you and I go back 6 odd years ago, something along those lines.
Yeah, mate, thereabouts. I think it was probably 2014 or 2015 when I popped along to my first one.
Yeah. So you went through another educator who was one of many educators that I also went through at the time. And what I've found is for a lot of people, they go and do their education, and they get their skills and they get their motivation, and then they want to hang around with people actually doing it. Is that kind of how it works for you, or?
I guess I think I was coming along to your events prior to actually working with the other educator.
Okay.
So I think they were actually a presenter at one of your events at that point. So
They were.
it
Now
was,
that you mentioned that, that's
it
going
was coming
way
through
back.
there. So yes, it was finding that was the path I wanted at the time, but obviously still appreciating and enjoying the networking events and the ability to, for me, it's that ability to create your own brains trust, and having that ability to socialize and have a few beers with people gives you more insight to who there are. And we all do need our own little brains trust people that we trust to call up, because everyone's going to have an issue that they need some help on.
Absolutely. And I guess that is the beauty of it. So the whole concept of me starting the group was based around reading a book, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, for those who aren't aware of the backstory. And it's all about the mastermind side of things, because, each of us have our own worldly experience, but when we have a problem, we tend to tackle that problem based on our limited worldly experience. But when you kind of put it into a mastermind, other people have different experiences, and so they're able to add different insights into things. So, and that's really what you're talking about there is, getting not only someone else's point of view, but then the ideas that spawn off of that, one of the powers of the masterminding at the end of each event. So, yeah. Now, Helen, yourself and your partner, Rich, kind of tag team coming to our events. You got a couple of midgets that you have to leave at home from time to time. But having said that, you equally have been coming along for a similar sort of timeline. So what was your first experience way back?
My first experience, well, actually, when I met you, Rob, it was at another event. And then a couple of years later, I said, hey, I recognize you. And you said, oh, I've got a network, let's come along. But, the unique thing was that we did talk. I mean, we spoke in a cafe before I came along, and we did talk about that. And it was the masterminding that actually drew me to your event, because I was really into trying to network and find like-minded people who could actually contribute to what we were doing, and I could contribute to what they were doing. So that was the really unique thing about your group that drew us to yours. And then obviously we've just stuck with you.
And I know I am ever grateful for the experience. So, okay, so the whole thing here is what we want to do is we want to try and inspire people who are thinking of getting into property development right now. And, it looks like this very daunting process. And to some extent it is. It's quite a bit of hard work. And I think a lot of us have the perception of, what we can achieve in 12 months. We tend to overestimate that. And then we tend to underestimate what we can do in 5 to 10 years. So with that in mind, keen to hear from each of you. What did you think you could get into as your first deal? And then what did you actually get into? Like what was your first deal? So Helen, I'll let ladies go first.
So I was starting with a renovation because, it was quite fairly low cost and quite quick in and out. And it actually ended up, I had grand designs. So I ended up going from a 3-bed, 1-bath, high-set Queenslander, and I built in the shed underneath and turned it into a big 4-bed, 2-bath structural renovation that I pretty much tried to save money on, and did a lot of the work myself, including the concrete lifting. But do you know what I learned personally? Hello. There's one of the roadmaps. But personally, that's the way I learned anyway. So for my first one, that was the best thing I could have done, to actually learn hands-on, learn all the trades, the skills of everyone that's going to be, you know, working alongside me and doing those jobs. So it was a real hands-on thing. So that was, for me, we broke even. We sold it pretty quickly. So we didn't make any money, but the growth during that first renovation was absolutely insane. And just thinking bigger than I should have thought, I suppose, from the start.
And I think a lot of us tend to overthink the first one. And so how many years ago was that?
That
first
was
year?
7 years ago.
7 years, very good. And as a byproduct of you now 7 years ago, one of your claims to fame is having just spent an entire year floating around the Caribbean, yes?
Correct, yeah.
So property's given you a fairly decent lifestyle. So tell us a little bit about what that experience was like.
On the yacht?
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, we bought a yacht in the Caribbean, and so the aim of it was to show the children that you can think big and you don't have to be restricted to a 9-to-5 job. You can actually educate yourself anywhere in the world and have a different outlook to life. So we're quite sheltered here in Australia. So we decided to buy a yacht and go to the Caribbean, where it is partially third world and challenge ourselves a little bit, show the girls that they can have a real challenge, and a little bit scary sometimes, but learn some new skills, and also get out there and meet new people and be able to network, even at their age, to not be scared of it. So yeah, fantastic. We did probably 25 countries last year, and the girls learned to dive, so they've learned new skills, physical skills, but they've also learned how to socially interact and understand that different people have a different outlook on life, so that they don't need money to be happy. They can live anywhere they want to live, and they can educate. You know, there's a lot of homeschooling, so we homeschooled for the year, so they learn to self-educate as well, which is really important in our learning and teachings of the children. So yeah, they now think big, and we've come back, and now they're thinking bigger, which is great.
How cool is that? That is. I wish my parents were that forthright up way back. So, but you know, we deal with the hand that we're given. So, what about you, Rod? What was your first deal, mate?
My first one was a 1-2 subdivision in Wishart on the south side of Brisbane. So it happened to be really good timing because there was no land available anywhere, and the nearest land was the Rochedale Estates, where the prices were quite high. So the team, being myself and the agent, decided we would peg our sale prices for the new lots based on the Rochedale Estate, and yeah, that's what we achieved. So it was a really fortuitous situation. Learned a lot out of that one. That was pretty interesting, and I was fairly lucky to have an agent marketing the initial site who was from outside the area, so they didn't quite understand the code. They didn't understand necessarily what could be done with the site. So a little bit of dumb luck, and then I also worked really hard to get onto her, her speed dial, so to speak, for this one.
Well, mate, one of the 5 Ds in getting discounted properties is distance, and finding an out of area agent is a fantastic way to either get under market or under evaluated property, so people don't actually realize what's sitting there. So, mate, kudos.
Absolutely, yeah. Cheers.
Yeah. And Jimbo, your first deal from memory wasn't that small, though, was it, mate?
No, I probably made the wrong choice in going into a combination deal with a builder that I'd known for a long time, and it was 22 apartments. So obviously didn't work anywhere near as well as one we had projected or looked at, and the builder actually went into administration and left me with a baby to be dealing with, I guess, even though it was certainly not a full control for me initially. It ended up that way. And then it was, I suppose, the realisation that there was so much out of your control when you're dealing with building elements and or something a little bit bigger like that. So it was then going back into doing the smaller subdivisions and applying your trade there and realization that when you are doing those smaller ones, it's all the results are driven by you, and there's no real impact by those outside influences that can be done when you introduce builds or other elements.
Yeah, and I had whilst it wasn't as large a project as yours, I equally started, I guess tried to go big bang first go and went for a fairly sizable townhouse project, and then had to downscale afterwards into smaller projects because I probably quit just a little bit too early, and then realized that cash flow was actually a really important part of this process. And you learn from your mistakes with those sorts of things, but yeah, I guess stepped back up into the larger deals again now. But you have to my guidance to people going forward is get something that you can actually bite on and chew on the first time. Don't try and eat the elephant first go. Yeah. Al, what about yourself, mate? What was your first deal?
Yes, I suppose I kind of went down that classic path of doing a renovation as my first deal. It was actually an apartment in New Farm. It was a huge 1960s one-bedroom apartment that I reconfigured into a two-bedroom apartment. I did that, sold it off, made quite a bit of money on it, moved in with my then girlfriend, who's now my wife, and proceeded to rip her townhouse in Tarragindi apart. We renovated that. Again, we sold that for a big profit. Decided to get married. Over the next period, we did 7 moves in 7 years. Managed to pop out 3 kids within 2 years of that process. And by the end of that 7th move, I got an ultimatum. I was either getting another wife, or I was doing, if I wanted to do another project, I was doing it with another wife. So I kind of thought about that one, and thought I had a pretty good wife, so I thought, well, I'll stick with this one. And that's where I kind of moved into more of the serious development, getting into the subdivisions, that type of thing.
Yeah. So wise move, my friend. Very wise move.
Yeah.
So that's where we all started. I guess all of us full-time developers now. So what's some of the, I guess the blessings and the freedoms and that sort of thing that I guess being able to do whatever you like, whenever you like, gives you, in no particular order? Well, okay, well,
yep. I suppose to answer that, I can give you a kind of idea of a typical day for me. So I usually get up about 5:30. I work in the office till about 6:30. Then my kids start getting up, so I switch the computer down, I step away from everything, and spend the next kind of 2-3 hours with getting the kids ready for school, getting them off to school, cycle to school with my sons, then come back and in the office for a few hours. If I need to be out on site anywhere, I go out on site, do that side of things. But I typically shut down about 2:30 from the computer to go and pick my kids up from school again, and then do dinner with them, get them to bed, and then if I need to go in the office again, I can do that later in the evening. So I suppose one of the key things I get out of property development is that flexibility in life. My kids have both parents there, where they're not getting left in before and after school care. And it allows us the opportunity to earn some good money, travel the world with our kids. Coming from overseas myself, we do that trip overseas quite regularly. So I suppose it provides that flexibility as well as providing a good income, albeit with the kind of risks and challenges that go with it. But yeah, it certainly provides a nice lifestyle and being there for kids, which is probably one of the key things for me out of it.
I agree with that. We when I did my first one, I had a little one in kindy and the other one was just starting prep, and they used to come with me to the building site every morning before school and after school, and get fed pies and chips and jump in holes and then go. But my I spoke to the old kindy teacher last week, and she said that my youngest one, when she was 3, she was standing pointing at the the walls in kindy and explaining the difference between oil-based and water-based paint and different color palette. So you know, they've grown from a very young age. So I suppose, you know, our takeaway from being able to do it full time is that the kids are with you and they live it with you, and actually they can, whether they want to do it when they're older or not, they're understanding and growing a lot of skills from a very young age, which is good.
Well, I had a somewhat similar experience with my daughter and taking her to sites and things like that. And much to her disgust, she's not into property at all. You know, very, very much not into it. But it's amazing what they pick up by osmosis. So even though she had no interest in it at all, we'll be driving down a road and she'll go, "Hey, Dad, there's an opportunity right there," right? And you go, "Well spotted, darling. We'll go check that one out." So they do pick it up, and they're like little sponges. So yeah. Jimbo, your kid's just a little bit grown up, mate.
Mate, he is. He's just about turning 25, but I guess it's provided the opportunity where, you know, me and his mother don't reside together. So he's living with me now, and come down and had a look, and he started looking at hospitality courses and that. So I sort of let him know what I was doing and explain what I was doing, and waited for him to come back and show the interest there. So now it's giving him, I guess, the opportunity to be working within the same sphere with myself, and you know, working into becoming a developer himself, but we've decided to do it amalgamated. So it provides a career direction if they're interested. So that's you know, a really big positive that you're setting something up for, you know, your future, you know, the young fella.
Yeah. And Rod, how many kids, mate?
Zero that I know of.
So
I know that's the answer you're looking for.
Correct. So, mate, you would have the freest of lifestyles in theory. How's that working out for you?
Yeah, I actually like to keep myself really busy. There's a lot of cafes to stalk and lots of meetings to have. So, no, it gives me pretty incredible freedom, really. I do wake up early as well, and either go for a run, get some time in the gym or something like that before getting into the day and attacking that. And you know, we've got a home office here. One of the other big things was that a couple of years after I got out of full-time work, we were able to sort of very carefully budget and then get my wife out as well. So we work together in the business, and believe it or not, we've actually found out a way to make that work. So so far, so that's good. So good so far. Yeah, so I guess it's there's freedom for holidays, there's freedom for time to spend on education. There's a bit of, I guess there's some time there to reflect on what it is that we want to be doing with our lives, and plan and design towards that way, so that we can be where we want to be in the next couple of years. And it's an ever evolving process. So when the kids do come along, which is probably not very far away, I'll be able to hopefully, like Al, shift my day around them to suit, or maybe I'll get an office outside the house. I'm not sure, one or the other.
Do the latter, mate. So interesting comment that you made there about designing your life. What I've found and there's quite a few in our network that have actually, I guess, made it out of the rat race. And they all seem to have one common thread, and that is that they've actually done it by design. Most of them haven't done it by happen chance. They've actually put a dedicated action plan in place to actually go and, I guess, set some very specific key goals and targets. So how's that worked for each of you? What were the motivating drivers to get you out? What was the process? I'll go in reverse order, Rod. Yeah,
sure. So I tend to agree about being specific and at least having a burning desire to do something. So yeah, in terms of goals, I was in IT for a long time, as you knew, and before that it was retail management. So I had this long career string of management. I was being promoted all the time in IT and so on, and that was all good. But every promotion came with more time required from me, and I was fortunate. I hadn't yet got into a position where the business wanted me to travel around the country, but it was coming. So next step or two, that was going to happen. And I thought, I'm just not going to have any time left, and the payment's not really going to cut it for me, to be honest. So I started looking around for what else I could do. And I got sold the dream with property of lying on a beach. And I think it's lies. I'm pretty sure. You could probably go to the beach quite a bit if you wanted. But so anyway, that was...
Skin, mate.
Huh?
Not with this skin.
No, me neither. So the driver was to get out of full-time work and be able to get into something that we could control ourselves, and where the more we worked or the smarter we worked, and if we planned our work and our strategy, we could, actually be making a difference, more so on our terms. And it's not been easy by any means, but it definitely didn't happen by accident.
No. Jim, what about yourself, mate?
I guess for me, it was not so much of probably a little bit different as per normal with myself, in that I'd left a job where I was the Queensland Secretary of a trade union, so I was somewhat unemployable. If I was looking to go and be employed normally, I would be a union troublemaker. If I was looking at something with a business acronym, it was the fact that I'd overseen an operation that had a 16 or a $17 million turnover. That was just a union. So it left in a position where it was a matter of finding what I wanted to do and creating my own, I guess, way forward, becoming a self-employed. So there was probably a need. It wasn't there was no safety net there. It was about needing to find that path, and the option was there. It was something I always had an interest in. But I guess given that there was no safety net, there was no plan B, there was a need to do it. So that need is a big driver as well. And probably not the best way, but by not having that safety net or not having that plan B there was, having to execute, there was a real importance in needing to do it.
Well, Tony Robbins talks about people don't get their wants, they get their needs. Because when we want something, usually we're comfortable in our life already. Whereas when we need something, like you, we don't have a choice. And so if we don't have a choice, then it's get on and hustle and actually make it happen. So, mate, I completely get that. Yeah. And kudos to you for actually, I guess, executing on it.
I know, I said, like Rod said, it does take some work, but it's doable for anyone out there. I mean, none of us were born with a knowledge or an ability to go and subdivide. You don't learn it at school. It's something that we've, everyone at one stage did a first project, so it's very doable for anyone. But it does take a bit of work.
And to that point, when you look at the major property developers out there, you've got your Lend Leases and you've got your Harry Triggerboffs and all that sort of stuff. You see them doing, uber-sized projects, but once upon a time, they did deal number one. And once upon a time, they probably did that small subdivision or that small reno or something way back. And so I think that is really the key to this, is to say, where you start is not where you end. So Al, what about yourself, mate?
So I suppose for me, I came from a trade background. I served an apprenticeship when I was younger, building aircraft engines, moved out to Australia, moved up the corporate ladder, and got myself to a position where I was the national procurement manager for Boeing and doing defense stuff. And I got myself to a level, I was in a job I absolutely hated. And I'd kind of got kind of miserable in that. Instead of being in a job that kind of should have been where my career was going, I'd reached that point where I really didn't like what I did. So when my twins were born, I've got twin boys who are now 10. When they were born, my wife was off the first year maternity leave, and then I took the second year off as paternity leave. And during that year, my wife kind of said, well, if you want to make a go of property development, this is your one chance to do it. So, between looking after 1-year-old twin boys and a 3-year-old girl, I kind of started that property development stuff. And the goal for me was, I don't ever want to go back to that corporate job that I hate. So now's my one chance to kind of try and achieve that. And that was the driver for me to not go back to that corporate lifestyle that I hated and I knew was ultimately making me miserable. And like any developer or any small business, there's been the ups and the downs and the challenges along the way. But if I think that I could still be in that corporate role, the lifestyle and the life I lead now is vastly superior than being in that environment that I was in previously.
Yeah, mate. And I don't know the exact stat, but I've heard that approximately 80% of us are in jobs that we don't like. You know, so
Yeah.
that's not an unusual position that you talk about. But so many of us just kind of put up with it because we don't think there's another way. And the answer is there is. But you have to be deliberate about it and actually, you know, you're quite fortunate that you had a very supportive wife to I guess, allow you, I guess, the bandwidth to try and do that. So, well done, mate. But anyone can do it if they set their mind to it.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to the teamwork of a relationship. You know, that if you're going to be a property developer or do your own business, you know, you've always got to consider that other person in the relationship to make sure they're on board. And it wouldn't be the first time my wife came home and I jump on her with the idea that I'm going a million miles an hour at, and she says, "Hang on, slow down. You've had all day to think about this idea." So yeah, that's part of it is keeping your partner involved and sharing with them where your thinking's going, rather than coming back and them getting home from work and saying, "Bought a house today."
Yeah, I bought a house today.
Which has happened.
How many? Oh, Rod's just disappeared for 2 seconds. But how many of you have gone out at the start of the day and then come home and went, "Hey, darling, I just bought a house today"?
Yeah, I've done that.
So we did it. So when we were in our early 20s, we went out and bought 3 houses in one day in the UK. We'd never bought any before. And yeah, they were old. That was a lessons learned that wasn't so good, but they were old houses that you had to maintain. So that wasn't such a good idea. And we hadn't done any due diligence on the area. So that was another second mistake. So yeah, we learned our hard lessons early on in life in the UK.
Very good. So what was your motivation and driver, Helen, to get out?
So I'm very different, actually, very different. So I had my dream job. I was a British Army officer, loved it. Couldn't think of anything better to do. And then I had children and we immigrated. So I was a bit of a blank canvas coming over to Australia. And rather than go and look for a job, I said, what do we both enjoy? And what could I really do on my own, or we can do together in the evening? So I just tackled it from if I'm going to educate myself to go and be employed, or educate myself to employ myself, which is the thing that we're both interested in. So that's where we started. So I was fortunate enough we could live on the one wage and I could go out and start property. So that's what I did. We tackled it. I started by doing a couple of courses, and then we just built our skill set from there. So. And
I guess that's another key lesson for people is follow your passion, right? So when you're following your passion, I don't know about you guys, but for me, it doesn't feel like work. It just feels like, you know, I'm turning up and doing this thing that I love to do. And it's crazy that having the ability to stop work at any point in time, but you don't want to because you just love it so much. Yeah. Okay, so before we go out to the wider Facebook land and see what questions they've got, what would be one specific piece of advice that you would want to give somebody who has not yet started? What would be the one piece of advice you want to give them in the process? I'll start with Al.
Tricky one. I suppose personally, one of the things that some of the mistakes I see some people make is, and everybody's different, but I've come across so many people that for their first deal, they try to bite off too much and they kind of get burnt along the way. You know, get yourself educated, don't bite off more than you can chew, learn when to ask for advice and when to speak up. That's certainly something that I've learned to do over the years is admit when things are going wrong and work out the solution of how to fix it. But yeah, I suppose that's the one piece of advice is don't bite off more than you can chew. Do your numbers, make sure you understand it, and have a plan and give it a go.
Well, it's impossible to know everything. So, I'm 32 odd years in property now, and I still learn something every day. So, that admitting when you don't know something, and then I guess being resourceful enough to actually find the answer is probably my biggest key to success. So, what about you, Jimbo? Piece of advice, mate. What would you say out there to Facebook land?
Spend some time to get to know who you are. Understand what you bring. From a deal point of view, obviously everyone will say education and things like that, which is yes critical, but also know who you are. Know what you bring to the table. If you're going to be doing deals where you need serviceability partners or money partners, you need to network. You're not going to just sit there and expect that they come and turn around. You've got to get out there, beat the pavement, talk to people, see people. If you've got all the finances and you don't need that, you can be looking at things from a different point of view. But you've got to understand who you are, what you bring to the table, and what you need to be able to make sure that you are dancing down that path.
Yeah, I guess there's two aspects to that. I guess there's knowing what your motivations and drivers and all that sort of thing is, but there's also what is the value proposition you provide to the other party in any joint venture that you might be looking at going into. You've got to solve someone else's needs for them to actually want to do business with you.
That's right, but I mean, someone may be there who has got zillions in the bank and they don't need anyone else. And if they don't need anyone else, that's fine. They can be doing a deal a different way than someone who does need to be looking at joint venture options. So it's just understanding what you've got in your tool bag, and then finding the missing pieces and be prepared to network.
Very good. Rod?
Yeah, I second everything Jim said there. Yeah, all of our projects are with joint venture partners. So it's absolutely important for us to be able to do multiple at a time. So that's how we operate. I agree with all of that. I used to treat all of this as a sprint, and it took me years and years and years. This is just a personal revelation that I don't feel it's a sprint. I think it's a marathon, and things don't always go to plan. So for that reason, I say you need to keep resources. And in terms of that, I mean, resources including money, time, emotional capacity to be able to deal with what's going on as well. Keeping your relationships in check with your family, your friends, the team around you. I think sleeping and eating are very important as well. Health, general health. And other than that, yeah, education, building your mindset and deciding what your strategy will be. Very
good.
important.
Helen?
I think it's about analysing your own risk and understanding what risk means to you. There's lots of strategies out there. You've got renovations, you've got developments, and someone could launch into a development. But if that's too high risk for you, don't go with what everybody is telling you to do. You have to really analyse it for yourself and for what you're capable of and what you can do. So, and part of that is, along with the education again, but it's also learning how to ask the right questions. Not just the question, but the right way to the right expert. So, that's also a really big learning point that I would say, just ask the right questions of the right people and understand.
Which infers that you actually understand that there's a problem, right? There's a lot of us that sometimes put our head in the sand to actually, is this actually a problem? And we try to solve it ourselves. It's about, firstly, is it a problem? Then how do I be resourceful and actually working out who is the best person to help me solve this problem? Property development is a team sport. It's, if you try to do it all by yourself, you may succeed, but it's hard work and it's very lonely. But when you join forces with peers, when you join forces with the right experts and that sort of thing, yes, there are going to be bumps, but you've got people that have got your back, and the journey becomes a lot easier from my side anyway.
I think it's taking on also one of the biggest things that new people think of that is really hard, and it is hard, is building. Everyone talks about your team, and it's actually who is on your team. And that's one of the things in the first couple of projects you need to work out, and you just have to sometimes trust that your civil engineer is going to be a good one that someone's recommended. And if they don't work out to be, then you move on to another recommendation. But you have to trust those recommendations, because at some point you have to take the plunge with somebody, and then you might have one person in the team that's not quite right, but you'll eventually find that team, and that's really important to get. Yeah,
very good. Okay, well, we're going to go and get some questions from Facebook land, and so thank you all for sharing that. So hang on, and we'll get some questions there. Before we do though, because this is our 8th birthday, you've been graciously sharing your stories. I actually want to hear the stories from those people out there. So I'm going to do a shout out to Facebook land, anyone who I guess has been to one of our meetups, that sort of thing. We want to hear your stories. So what has been your learnings, your updates, the greatest takeaways and learnings that you've got to share with others. If you pay it forward and help others, then you'll find that they will help you back in return. So if you want to provide that feedback, propdev.info/feedback, we would love to do that. And in order to incentivize people actually doing that, anyone who does provide feedback, I'm actually going to do, I guess, a special masterclass on No Money Down. So in approximately 2 weeks' time, we'll book that down. So anyone wanting to provide feedback or just wanting to come to that masterclass, the only way you're going to get into that is to actually give me the feedback. So it's not for sale, other than spending 5 minutes of your time telling us, what you've actually gotten out of the world. So let me press a few buttons and see if I can actually find some questions on Facebook. Give me 2 secs, folks. This is always the random part of this, is trying to get the questions, because Facebook, when you're going through Zoom, is a little bit clunky, let's just say. So hang on 2 secs while I mute myself. Okay, so we got a whole bunch of people saying hello. So hello, everybody. Rachel's saying, I guess, both new and old friends, and specifically, I think she's calling you old there, Rod. I'm not sure why, but I'm not saying if she's calling you old or just saying you're an old friend. Luke's saying hello. JJ's got a question. Helen, hi. Has there been, that has been my plan for a while. Would love to hear any advice, particularly on buying the boat. That's from JJ.
On buying the boat. So buying a boat is harder than buying anything you've ever bought in your life. It's harder than a house, and it's harder than a car or anything. We had a spreadsheet. I don't know, it was probably 100 line items long with comparisons. There's so many little things that you're buying on a boat that's different to anything else. You could have an air conditioning unit, or you don't want one. So if you need any more advice on buying the boat, I can put you in touch with Rich, and he will email away, because he loves that stuff.
So, I mean, on the boat, you guys bought it, sailed around for a year, and then sold it again.
Yeah, within 2 weeks.
Did you break even?
We actually didn't do too badly. Boats, you normally lose a lot of money, but we put, I think, $20,000 into it, and we sold it for I think it was about 20 grand we lost on the boat in that time, which is absolutely amazing, because normally it takes you sticking it in a marina, and you're paying berth fees, and you're paying brokers, and we actually got very, very lucky. And like property, your first offer is usually your best offer. So we put it on the market, and in 36 hours we had an offer with a contract, and we took the offer with the contract, and he wanted it. It usually goes through a survey, and it usually takes about 6 months to sell. So we should have been still on the yacht about now, which is what we were planning, and they wanted it within 2 weeks. no survey. So we got lucky and we cashed up and came away. Yeah, so it cut our trip short, but we were lucky. And then COVID hit, obviously. So yeah, we got out.
Good advice about take the money on the table. A lot of people get greedy for that extra $1,000 or extra $5,000 and they end up burning it in holding costs. I've certainly been guilty of that early in my career, less so now. It's always tempting to go, yeah, I think it's worth a bit more, but you know, velocity of money and turning your projects over is always good. So JJ's got another question. So it's actually to me, but I think I'll throw it out to the panel. So hi, Rob. Do you ever build when you do subdivisions that you refer to, or do you sell the vacant land? So I'm happy to answer, but what do you guys say to that?
Yes, for me, it's generally going to be the land, unless it's in a suburb where it makes sense to do a build. So some suburbs it makes sense, some suburbs it doesn't make sense. Generally, there's no money in the build unless it's in a desirable suburb. So it really comes down to where your subdivision is. But for me, generally, it's about the land, get rid of the land, and it's a quicker deal as well.
That's what I would say. But also one of the subdivisions we did, you couldn't sell it without building on the land behind as well. So that was part of the deal. You had to build. So yeah.
Yeah. So as the question was directed to me, I'd second what both of you have said. I'll probably add a further clarification, and that is, when you're starting to do your suburb analysis, you'll quickly find out whether or not it makes more money to exit as land or makes more money to exit as the build. And you should know that up front before you go into the deal. When you know that, that's then going to determine your exit strategy at the point of actual acquisition. And so sometimes I build and sometimes I sell as land based on, I guess, my market analysis and what is actually wanted in that particular area. Now, if you sell as land, then you can typically do more projects in less time and velocity of money turns them over, but you don't make as much money on each individual deal. So there's a balancing act of, you know, how many projects I want to run and how much money I want to make in one big hit. So, you know, if you can afford to run multiple projects, you might want to run multiple small projects or put it all into one bigger project. That's the choices people have to make.
I think I would say,
okay.
I was going to say that if you're doing a joint venture, generally your joint venture partner likes low risk and quick turnaround with the profit. So if you are going into a joint venture with a land split, it's probably a popular one to do to get more joint ventures partners to do the short, quick one.
We've done a number over the last few years and before that as well. And we'll find that if we're going to work in a certain area, say where I live, for example, you can subdivide and build a couple of homes here and do really well. But if you subdivide and sell the land, you're probably not really going to make anything. If you go 15 minutes down the road, it's the reverse. So if you build a house, you make nothing, 10 grand maybe for all your extra risk and capital you've got to raise and all the extra time in it. Whereas the money's just in the land. So, and rarely do the two meet in my experience. It's always been one or the other, but the higher end suburbs we like to construct in, but we've got the experience because we've done, 26 odd, I think, over the years, custom homes around the place. So we messed up the first few in different ways and we've kind of polished that along the way. So we understand what to do for different areas. I don't think people should just jump into constructions unless they're really certain on their market. It's pretty important. We see it happen all the time with little faux pas around the place in terms of layouts and what people have done. And it can be a bit of an issue with the sales prices at times.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got a fantastic question from Sarah. So Sarah says, can you each explain how you were able to move into being full-time? So going from a part-time developer to full-time development.
Well, mine was easy because I was doing it full-time from the start, so I'm a bit different. So I'll pass it out to everyone else, I think.
I guess mine had a lot of similarities there where it was, I had to do it. So I was doing it full-time purely because I had no plan B. So it was about making it work. I had to make it work. I had to do whatever that was required to make it work.
Yeah, I suppose for me that driver was that I didn't want to go back to that job that I hated. So I was lucky enough that my wife said I could have that opportunity to give it a try. So that was the key driver for me to make it work.
I didn't burn the boats, but I wasn't going to go back to IT basically. So when it was time to shift, we understood that we had, I think it was, I don't know how much money was in the bank, but it equated to about 12 months of time. And if my wife kept working, it meant that I had 12 months to start bringing in some income and then tip the scales in the other direction. So that's what we did. And we just charged at it, and it worked out well.
Yeah, and for me personally, I went big bang and did my first project that actually made me enough money to get out. But I stupidly jumped out before the project was actually finished, and didn't have my next project lined up. And from that perspective, I went part-time. I actually had some medical challenges at the time. I went part-time, and it was the medical challenges that kind of made me pull the pin a little bit earlier than I would have normally liked, because I knew that I couldn't do, I guess, the workloads that I was doing before with 18-hour days and the like. And so by being able to do part-time, it allowed me, I guess, another 2 days a week where I could dabble in that property, I guess, whilst I was still doing my full-time job. So it did allow me a little bit of a transition, but I got a little bit over eager and jumped without getting the next deal. So I didn't have the cash flow I needed. Had lots of equity, but no income stream at that point in time. So note to self, income stream puts food on the table. So, you know, whatever you do, make sure you've got that base covered.
That's pretty important one you said, Rob, too, about, you know, everyone gets in their first deal and it becomes a sacred piece of everything living, and you're fixated totally on that, and you don't realize that you need to be getting your next project ready and your next project ready. So I guess the big one is that when you want to transition into full-time, is you need to be comfortable that you can be bringing projects on to give you that continual flow, because when you do your first one, you forget all about looking at the next one until you finish. So everyone makes that mistake. And the other one is that there are other ways to make money in property, you know, from a cash flow point of view. You can find a deal, you can flip them, you can be, you know, passing on deals to other people just to make sure that you have got the cash flow you need.
Yeah, and so that's something that I did as well when we had in the early days. I flipped deals for a finder's fee. I did project management of other people's projects because I had lots of time. Lots of people were still working and didn't have that time available. So I leveraged my time and did those extra things on top of our own deals because I had that in my capability.
Yeah, and what I would say is there's really two fundamental ways that people tend to get out. One is that they build a nest egg that would effectively pay their wage, and they draw down on that over some time, and so they jump out early and they draw down that nest egg and they buy their time. But they're effectively eroding that nest egg as they live and put food on the table and that sort of thing. But you know, they may buy a year or 2 years worth of time in doing that. The other way is hustle, keep your day job, keep your serviceability, and work part-time in the evenings until you can actually duplicate your income. Now, I would say you want to probably combine those two together and say, you know, get a deal or two away, prove that you can do it, prove that the second one, that it wasn't a fluke the first time, build that nest egg up. Now you've got a choice, right? Now you've got that nest egg. Now you've proven that you can actually duplicate your wage. And it's, you know, what feels right for you. Have you got someone else in the household who can ensure that food and bread get put on the table, fuel in the car, that sort of thing? And do you want to go all in, right? Once you commit, it's funny that you make things happen because you have to, right? When you can't be half pregnant, right? So once you commit, things happen.
And that'll be a personality thing as well as to which way people choose to go. People have different risk profiles. So some people like to jump in with both boots, others don't, and I totally respect that. I think it's a really good way to do it while you're working still, while you still got serviceability.
Yeah, I think if I was going to give general advice, I would say do that. You know, do it as a side hustle, duplicate your wage through projects, and then look at your own personal circumstance. So we have almost an identical question from JJ, so I think we've already got that one covered. Some good comments, you know, Daniel saying, agreeing that people don't get their needs, they get their musts. Dean is saying, so good to hear from level-headed, successful people. I think he's meaning you guys, not me. So Krishna says, what was your first deal? Sorry, what was your first deal you made and how did this go? So we actually answered that one already, Krishna, right at the very start, mate. So won't cover that one again. But what I might do is spin that around and say, what was the biggest lesson from the first deal? I'll start with Rod. What was your biggest lesson from deal number one, mate?
Deal number one worked out pretty well for me. So that was a nice start. Maybe I should talk about what I consider the worst deal. Would that be more beneficial?
Yeah,
so
go for it.
We had a friend who had done a reasonable sized land subdivision out south of Toowoomba. So Toowoomba's already kind of 2 hours west of Brisbane City. And then if you go another 30 minutes south, you're in the middle of nowhere. So that's probably a good place to buy a block of land out of a friend's subdivision, I'd say, and build a house in it. So we decided to build a single house out there in this tiny little town called Clifton. And at the time, there had been some sales around the place at a certain price level, which was quite reasonable. We thought we would try to replicate this. So this was our first foray into construction, and we didn't hit the mark at all. So we built a house that was too small. It had the right metrics, but it was too small, didn't have the right level of finish, didn't have the right landscaping, all this kind of thing. And we got, I think we received about 70,000 less than the market. So that broke even. And so, yeah, I got to drive hours every time I wanted to see the site. So that was lesson number one. I like to do things that are a little bit close to me. I'm not about managing anything too far away. Some people do like to do interstate management. Might be good if you've got a local team, however. And yeah, houses aren't houses, I suppose. So they've all got different characteristics, and we just didn't have the budget to build the right thing for the market that we're trying to peg for price. It was just a rookie error. So a few lessons out of that for sure.
Very good. Biggest lesson out of deal one, Helen?
I would say, well, we bought a first house before we did the first deal in Brisbane, but I would say personal attachment. It's quite hard to do a deal and be completely focused on, when you start out, to be completely focused on what other people are going to want and what the market needs and what you like and what you think the market needs. There's a real difference there. And I think personal attachment to, you know, I did that big, you know, over the top reno to start with. That's because I would have really wanted that. I don't think it needed it. And that's probably why we broke even and we didn't make any money on that first deal, because I overspent wanting to make it really nice how I would want it. So, and that happened on our first, you know, principal base of residence as well up in Townsville. We just bought and we wanted to do it. And we were personally attached and we didn't want to sell it. So then the market went down. So we're still holding that property and we're going to develop that eventually. But, you know, personal attachment, I think you have to remove yourself.
Yep. And Al, biggest lesson, deal number one, mate?
So for me, deal number one went extremely well. It was just a simple little renovation of that apartment. I suppose one deal that didn't go well for me was I had got into doing a couple of townhouse projects, and I took on a project that was too big for me, and I ended up going all in on the project. You know, everything was on the line with it, and at the end there was some major issues with the civil engineering and the work the plumber had done. So between the civil engineer and the plumber, it ended up taking us 6 months to get the sign off from Urban Utilities to complete the deal, to get final sign off. And that was the deal that almost broke me, because we were all in, we had everything on the line, and we ended up holding that finished product for 6 months. All the properties were under contract. We had buyers lined up on off the plan sales, and that was probably the biggest, hardest moment for us in doing the property development. And it was just came out of left field. We thought the deal had gone perfectly. So yeah, I suppose the biggest lesson for me is always to have some reserve available from a cash perspective. And certainly now I would never go all in on one deal. I much rather to have multiple smaller deals running and spread that risk over multiple deals. And that's just a personal thing. As I get a bit older, I don't want to risk everything in one property deal.
And Jimbo?
Yes, yeah, more for me, it's the size and the fact that, when you're introducing the build element, a lot of things are outside your area of control. And, you want to make sure that at the very least you have a sound understanding. I guess Rod was talking about having done multiple houses, so he's got a sound understanding of the construction processes now. But yeah, that was probably missing, and it was reliant upon someone who I was, called a friend as a builder. So not having that expertise in that field was certainly something I wouldn't do again. I wouldn't be getting into a deal if I didn't have those expertise and I was relying upon someone else.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, folks. Have another question from Kay Wong. So now that you're all full-time developers, what is your main source of income? Is it, I guess, is it from loans, or is it from JVs, or how do you actually derive your revenue stream? Very general, broad. You don't have to go into details, folks.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so predominantly chunks from projects. That's what I do at the moment. I have done a little bit of cash flow stuff along the way. I've got one cash flow property at the moment. Gives us a bit of wage, and while the interest rates are really low, it's more than normal. But mostly chunks. I also sometimes charge, depending on the structure of the project and so on, I might charge a success or a buyer's agent fee up front, because I used to be a buyer's agent as my first entry into property as well. And sometimes a little bit of project management along the way, just a small bit across multiple projects might help keep the lights on. Beyond that, yeah, we'll be setting up some other cash flow business soon, but that's a little bit different to full-time development. It'll be more like a service. So that's what we do.
Jimbo?
Yeah, very similar, I guess. It's there's obviously the ability to flick deals, like we mentioned before. There's, if you're finding a deal, whether you buy it through a buyer's agent or whether you find it yourself, the work's still there that goes into it. So, at times there'll be a source fee in the project, and if it's a bigger deal, there may well be an element of project management fee as well. But it's about structuring it and talking with your joint venture partners, if that's who you have, or structuring it the way that you have got that ability to utilize the projects to generate that cash flow. Maybe you do a guaranteed fixed rate return for everyone in one project, which gives you flexibility in that project, and you're doing joint ventures in the other projects. So it comes down to structuring the deal and making sure that you communicate that with others involved in the deal.
Yeah. Well, in the interest of time, I won't ask the same question from everyone, because there's a few more questions to come. But what I would say is the ultimate goal is to no longer be a property developer, right? We want passive income. That's the absolute desired outcome. So being able to keep profits out of your projects is really the way to do that. Where you own an asset outright and no debt associated with it, that's 100% positively geared. So that's the ultimate goal. And then I guess the projects then give you chunk money to, I guess, improve your lifestyle and, allow you to go on nice holidays. And that's how I derive my income. And that's, I guess, ultimately we start out doing property development in order to no longer be property developers. But there's probably how I would phrase that. So, okay, so what's our next question here? So lots of, thanks for sharing. Great feedback. So that's from dozens of people. Vanessa says her greatest takeaway was when I told her just pick one strategy and stick with it. So thank you, Vanessa. Jesse says, have spoken to some of the panel members and it's great to see that they're willing to give advice freely without expectation. So thank you, folks. I guess from both myself and the audience, clearly. Julie says, hi all, what was the link for the feedback again, please? I'll post that again. Sorry, it looks like Shelley's already done that for me. So thank you, Shelley, appreciate that. Lots of thank yous. More thank yous. Man, there's a lot of thank yous. You guys are popular. Let's see if I can actually find a question. Are there any books that you would suggest for someone starting out in property development? No particular strategy in mind as yet.
I guess the one that I enjoyed was John Lindeman's Understanding the Australian Property Market, and talking about demand and supply. I found that one to be really interesting and one I could resonate with me, I guess.
And for those who don't know who John Lindeman is, he's a property economist. He goes back a good 30 plus years in, I guess, property economy. Was one of the original people working at Pricefinder, was one of the original people working at Residex, and so has a very long history in and around, I guess, the property market. And a good segue, Jim, and you didn't even know that you were doing it, mate. But John and I are now going to do a regular Sunday session once a month to talk about things that are actually happening in and around the property market. So thank you for that free plug, mate. So watch for that one to be announced. But yeah, that one's coming soon, and that will be an ongoing monthly series. So yeah, thank you, mate. Okay, any other key books for anyone?
So, Idle doesn't come to mind. You're out.
One thing I do, I'm not necessarily a huge reader, but I do listen to a lot of podcasts, which I find I can do on the run, round the house, that type of thing. And it's a variety of podcasts from general investment to economics to property ones. I tend to listen to podcasts at 1.5 or 2 times speed. So it sounds as if it's on fast forward a lot of time, but I divulge quite a lot of podcasts rather than sit and read books. And I do some audio books as well, but I prefer that audio as opposed to sitting down reading a book. And
may as well give a free plug, but for me, these Sunday sessions, we actually push onto YouTube so you can watch them as well. So if this is your first time joining, we've got all our back catalogue of stuff on there. So any other books, folks?
I was going to say, I don't have one. Did you mute Helen?
Oh, no, I muted myself. We like Steve McKnight. So he was one of the first people we looked at when we came to Australia, actually. So we've read his books and listened to podcasts and seminars and webinars.
And I think that to answer the question, the challenge in, I guess, a property development specific book is that there's different strategies and there's also different legislations in each state and also different legislations even within the one city. So Sydney has 35 councils, for example. So that's 35 different sets of rules. So it's very hard to get a good property development book. But there are lots of fantastic property books. So the ones that you guys mentioned, which are more property in general rather than property development. So, buy and hold and what the market means and how to read the market, which are all really critical in determining who you're selling your product to. So, know your target audience and create the product specifically for them. So, okay. Matt's got a question. How many deals are you running at any one time and what size are they? So Rod, go for it, mate.
We got 6 on the go at the moment that have a gross realized value of around, it's just under 12 mil. I think it was around 11.8 mil. That'll be the sales values. And looking to take on, working on another one at the moment and maybe another one as well. But it all depends on whether that comes off. So a couple of those will also fall off. You know, they'll be finished soon. So yeah, I don't recommend doing 6 at once though.
Well, it depends on your lifestyle, and it depends on the deal complexity. You know, sometimes one deal is too much, and I know other people in our network that are doing upwards of 10. So, you know, it's possible, but you've got to work out what's your skill set and what's your time availability as well.
You might get a haircut like this.
Yeah, well, that's 2 of us with the same haircut, mate. So, yeah.
For me, it's about pieces of stock. So I probably look at 20 to 50 bits of stock a year. So if it's doing a larger land subdivision, there might be a few smaller ones there to complement it. Or if it's doing smaller ones, there might be, you know, four smaller ones at a time, about 7 lots each. But yeah, it's about trying to limit and making sure that about 50 pieces of stock a year is probably as high as I want to be getting.
Yep. Al, yourself?
Yeah, so up until earlier this year, I probably had kind of that 2-3 subdivisions running at a time. At the moment, I'm kind of just sitting on the fence a bit and just have one nearing completion. So just, I suppose I'm just sitting watching the market a bit at the moment to see if there is going to be much of a change. But actively keeping an eye on the market just now and kind of looking for that next deal at the moment.
Very good. And Helen, having recently just come back from, I guess, your round the world tour, are you guys actually in anything at the moment, or are you?
No, we're not. We're watching the market, but we've got a couple that we're looking at preparing to do, like a structural reno or a land split that we already own. So developing what we already have. Yeah.
And for me personally, it's anywhere between 3 and 6 at any one point in time, depending upon, I guess, how the market cycles are actually moving and that sort of thing. And the fact that I typically fly around the country and run these meetups and these Facebooks, you know, by the time I combine those together, that keeps me a very busy boy. Yeah. Declan's got a question. Now that you're all successful, what are some of the things that you do to keep moving forward to get you to the next level? i.e., are there further courses and or reading that you do now that you've already kind of made it out? Jimbo?
I guess it's, you know, by utilising networking sessions like here and surrounding yourself with the people, talking to people, it's providing that continual improvement. It's, you know, it's doing courses without need to doing courses because you're interacting with some knowledgeable people and we're all learning from each other, and we've got the ability to be calling up any person because you've made good connections with people. You know, it's not just a passing connection. You've made some good connections, and you know, you pretty feel as though you've got the ability to be calling up any number of people and seek their viewpoints. So it's a continual education through the networking that we do for mine.
Yeah. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah,
yes, I suppose.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Rock, paper, scissors, folks.
Go on, Al.
Yeah, so for me, I think the one thing with property development is it's a continual evolvement and a continual change in what you do. You can come across a strategy that works fantastic for you. You might run 1 or 2 deals in that type of strategy. Then other people catch on to that strategy and the money's just not there. So then you've got to evolve and continuously be looking at what is your next strategy, what's your next development you're going to do. Is it going to be similar to what you've done before? And that's not necessarily always going bigger with each development. It's a case of what is it that suits you at that time and what does the market require at that time. So for example, at the moment, blocks of land seem to be quite popular, especially at that lower end of the market, given the first time grants and the grants that are available just now. if those grants come to an end, when they're supposed to come to an end, will those blocks of land be suitable and be as desirable moving forward? So it's about understanding what the market is and where you're at personally, I think, and continuously evolving and moving onwards.
Absolutely. Now, I'm mindful we've gone well past the hour, folks, and the questions still keep coming in. So I'm going to put it to you guys. Are you happy to keep hanging around for a little bit longer and keep being interrogated?
Yeah.
Got time.
Yep, sure.
Yep.
Giddy up. Okay. Okay. So next question. Gian's asked the question, do you subdivide and sell the land in greenfield or brownfield areas, or have you seen profitable deals in dense suburbs with subdivision and land sales only?
I only work in infill, so I don't do greenfield. So that's all I know.
Okay, so for those who aren't aware, infill is filling in the gaps in between stuff that already exists. And whilst you can do infill almost anywhere, we're typically talking, inside definitely inside the 20K ring and mostly inside the 10K ring. Yeah.
Yeah, so I suppose for me, I live in the inner south side of Brisbane. I like deals within that 5-10 kilometres of where I live. I like to be able to drive out to my sites, meet tradesmen on site. I've no desire to be driving an hour to a greenfill area. And because I've lived in this area for the last 10 years, I know the good suburbs from the bad suburbs. I know the good streets from the bad streets. So I can very quickly assess a site or a development when it comes up, just by doing a drive past, doing my searches. Whereas if I have to go to suburbs outside of that scope, it's more effort, and it's probably increases the risk around not knowing that area as well. So that's what works for me.
Area expertise. It's something that I drum into my guys doing our program. So being an area expert saves you so much effort. It's not funny.
Yeah.
100%. I'd say that it's the different side of the street can be a completely different price depending on if it's got a view. And if you didn't know that suburb, you would just look at the street and think you're going to get a high price for, on a sale when you've got the wrong side of the street.
Jimbo?
Too, it's about, in those greenfield areas, it's generally the really big boys who have been there and purchased it for a long time ago or optioned it up a long time ago, and they've acquired the land at really, really low rates. So I'm not interested in going and trying to be competing against the big players. So that's the reason I keep out of the greenfield. I much prefer to be doing it in the established suburbs. That's certainly an area that we focus on. But yeah, it's just about, the big boys, they've got too much muscle. They've got the ability to, go to war, and it's just too much risk for mine.
Yeah, and I would say, picking up on that point, mate, that the big guys, they have overheads that they need to run, because they're very big teams and that sort of thing. And they tend to not be profitable when they scale down to, I guess, the smaller infill projects. And so you're not competing with those guys when you're doing infill type developments, or what's called missing middle. And so it's a nice sweet spot to actually get into, that there's plenty of demand, and you're not going to get out muscled. Okay, so Maggie wants to know, what are some of the bad deals that didn't work out? What have you learned from those experiences?
Very similar to what we talked about previously. It's too bigger and building elements. So I think it was one that we sort of loosely touched on. So that was for mine. It's keeping it to the right size and not doing the build elements where you've lost control.
I've learned to do estimates up front on costs.
Do estimates on costs up front?
Yeah, that's what I've learned to do, is price the deal up front rather than sort of jumping into it. So that's something I did quite early on as well, and had to lay 80 meters of pipe and concrete driveway and all sorts of things that I wasn't really aware that I'd have to do, and it's got to be paid out of somewhere. All comes out of profit.
Well, I guess that's the whole element of a feasibility, and the one key point that I would make about feasibility is a lot of people think it's this magic thing that gives you an answer just by plugging some numbers into a spreadsheet. The reality is the spreadsheet is, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't know how to do your site analysis right, then you won't identify the problem. And if you don't identify the problem, you can't cost it out. And if you can't cost it out, it never makes it onto the spreadsheet. And equally, even if you get all the costs in, you then need to work out what are the sales going to be like, and can you get that right? And then the spreadsheet just does the adding and subtracting of those two things. So no magic spreadsheet will give you the answer unless you actually give it the right inputs.
And I think sometimes there's, you can ask the experts and say, how much is this going to cost? But unless you actually phone around and spend that time really getting those costs, they can blow out massively. We had one on a stormwater pump, and we were told prices for it, and it was completely blown out when I actually did the analysis and rang around the stormwater pump people. I don't know the name for them. Yeah.
Very good. So a couple more people saying thank you for all the valuable feedback. Margaret saying happy birthday to us. Margaret is probably one of the 10 people that were in the audience when you were there, Al. So Margaret goes way back. Lots of other people saying thank you. Lots of good, feedback. JJ said, I've heard several horror stories on townhouse projects. Do you think they're riskier or harder than other types of project?
I personally feel they're tougher than house construction, and they're tougher than a subdivision, and tougher than the two combined. In Brisbane City Council, there's a stringent new form of compliance, and it's quite detailed. So we've just gone through that recently. Look, each to their own though. It's up to the profit in the project, what you want to take on, how much time you have, capital, risk profile, the whole lot. So in short, yes, I believe they're riskier.
I'd second that. And we had a bit of a tough go on our first townhouse project, and we interviewed builders. We did we got them to do a quote. It was all very detailed right up front, and the builder we still picked went rogue anyway. So we had a bit of a horror story with that one. But we picked ourselves up afterwards, but that's just a lesson. And it doesn't, you're not doing it yourself. You're putting it out to a builder, and you have no control over how they're doing. No matter what they say to your face, you still don't know unless it's a trusted party, really. Yeah. And I'd also say with townhouse builds and developers, some suburbs that you build in close to the city don't like developers. So they'll cause you many, many problems. So the neighbours are a real issue sometimes on developments. More developments, I'd say, building than actual renovating, but they can cost you a lot of money.
Yeah.
If you need more than a backhoe, you should stay away.
If
a backhoe can knock a house over, you can dig a hole, that's enough.
Keep it simple, mate. I'm going to say the thing with a townhouse project is you either, if you're going to build one townhouse, then you have to build them all, right? So, you can't be half pregnant. With a land subdivision, you can choose to build no houses. You can choose to build one house, two houses, three, whatever actually fits. So it's a lot more flexible. That said, you get a good townhouse project working, the profits that come from it's like drinking from a fire hose, right? So the hassles are worth it, but you need to make sure that you're actually ready and up for the challenge. And more importantly, you don't get paid until the end of the project, which could be anywhere between 2 and 3 years after starting. So it's a negative cash flow situation for 2 to 3 years until you get that payday. So, look at your cash flow situation and say, can I actually afford that negative cash flow before going in?
That was the problem I had with townhouses. It was a very long time between paydays. And if the market moves within that time that you're committed, you can find yourself quite exposed as a small developer, particularly if you're kind of committed all your funds into that one project.
Yeah. Have another question from Jörg. So this is very similar to one we've asked before, so I might just spin it just a little bit. So after what time and how many deals did you become a full-time developer? So I'm just going to say, give me two numbers, how many years and how many deals until you got out? Rod.
I quit my full-time job and I had no deals, and then I got a deal. And I spent all my time on the deal. And then I got a second deal while I was running that one. So it took a few months to find that deal.
Yep. Helen, you've kind of already covered that one.
Yeah, kind of different, but from starting my education to purchasing was 6 months, doing all the due diligence, ready to purchase the first property.
Yep. And Jim, you've kind of covered that one as well. Kind of, you went in full in first go.
However, I would say, in retrospect, I would have loved to have 2 years in playing it differently and having a safety net. But that's not the path that I had. I had the no safety net, no plan B. That would have been more ideal.
Yep. And Al?
Yeah, so I was kind of the opposite. I'd done a heap of renovations while still working before I finally jumped into that full-time role.
Very good. And Ali says, how did you each decide on your first strategy?
I don't like painting, so I didn't want to do renovations. So I decided I'd knock down houses, which is fun, and subdivide land.
Very
Simple
good.
as that.
I guess
So
it
for
was
me,
mine.
my first strategy was, while I was still working and doing those renovations, I had picked up a couple of blocks of flats along the way. The first one we strata titled and sold them off as individual units. And the other one we were running as an illegal block of flats, which we kind of decided we'd pushed our luck with. But the land was zoned LMR, so we demolished the illegal flats and built townhouses. So it was more looking at the assets we held and getting the best outcome from them to free up capital to fund future developments. That was our initial strategy.
Very good. So there's hundreds of people saying, thank you for sharing. So I'll skip a lot of those. Diana wants to know, with all your experience, how do you feel about lending your own money out for other people's deals rather than doing your own deals?
We're very comfortable with that. We've lent money even during doing our own deals if it's a good deal that comes along, and we've got a good joint venture partner that we trust. We'll do that if it works at the time, even while we're doing our own deals.
I've lent out a little bit, but it's really not much compared to what I borrow in for the projects. I guess my best skill and leverage in that respect is me finding the next project, stacking it up in terms of the team and the resources required to do it. And usually I need the resources in to do it. So, however, if I didn't have projects to do that with, I would be most likely investing in other people's deals to get exposure to other project types and experience and so on. I'm learning that way.
Yeah, no issue. I mean, if you've got a self-managed super fund, 9 times out of 10, you can't be investing in your own project anyway. So there's generally always going to be an avenue there, and it's always something that you're happy to be looking at. If we're doing developments, we understand development, so better off being in a product that we know rather than a different product.
Yeah, well, what I would say is I've lent money out several times. One of the beauties about being in a network such as this is you actually get to know the other people that are actually doing developments on a very, very personal level, and you know how good they are as an operator. You understand how good they are as a person. In the end, it's about the velocity of money, and if it's sitting in my bank account doing not much, then I would rather lend it to someone who I know, like, and trust to get them to go do some work and actually get it working, but you have to balance that out by saying, well, if my next deal comes around the corner, am I going to need it back? And that's the way up. It's not a matter of don't want to. It's a matter of, well, I think I can spend it better than someone else. So, and I always try to, as much as I can, try to keep it in-house, and similar to everyone else, tend to get money in from other people to JV into my projects as well. Okay, so Zdenko wants to know, how has COVID-19 affected your projects?
Hasn't affected at all. We've, I guess I made a decision recently and put on a salesperson to drive our sales. We utilised COVID to really build up our sales channels. We've moved about 20 bits of stock during COVID. And surprisingly, generally through land and through more sophisticated utilising project marketers, the feedback we're getting from all the project marketers are that 70% of the sales are interstate people, so they are people who don't get the builder boost. So whilst, yes, the builder boost has been quite good, the fact that 70% of the sales are coming from interstate people indicates that there is still some positivity there. So yes, it's about caution, but I'm certainly looking in a couple more deals, and also looking at a bigger deal, by having a lot of faith in the sales partners that I have.
Very good. Anyone else?
Yeah, I suppose I've been a bit surprised by how the market has turned out. Initially, I thought there was going to be a bit more of a slowdown and a bit more of a turn down. Certainly to date, that certainly hasn't come along. In fact, a couple of blocks of land that we had trouble, we were sitting on, that were proving a bit difficult to sell with the builder's grant, the interest levels went through the roof on them, and they moved relatively quickly. So yeah, to date, I've not seen any real negative impact, certainly in that kind of lower end of the market. I've not seen any major impacts yet here in Brisbane.
I think that's largely because of our geography, and for full disclosure, all of us are based in Southeast Queensland, and we're fairly free in that COVID sense. I think areas like Sydney and Melbourne are a lot more heavily impacted. That said, I did see some slowing right at the very start. So the first round of COVID that came out saw a massive slowdown, but then it picked up again when I guess the builder's grant was actually announced. The challenge is, where are you in your projects? So if you're at the point where your projects are just coming to market from a sales perspective, wacko, we're all doing great. But if you're halfway through a project and the builder's grants are going to run out, we are in a recession, and what's around the corner is a little bit sketchy to be able to predict that, I think, at this point in time. So me personally, I'm using this opportunity to, I guess, cash out of my projects and sit on the sideline just for a little bit, because I know that there's going to be buying opportunities that are coming with, the recession starting to kick in, and I guess banks starting to do foreclosures and things like that. I think there's going to be plenty of buying opportunities come January, February type mark, is my prediction. Yeah. Okay, so go for it, mate.
Can I just make a really quick comment, because it's different to the rest of the guys, actually. So I found paperwork processing is much slower through the authorities, council, Queensland Urban Utilities, people that deal with the water and so on, water and sewer and all that kind of thing, with people working from home, banks releasing consent documents for titles to be split, and all that sort of side of the process. We've got some land selling in lower fours. Builders Boost really helped that, because the house and land together has to be no more than 750K. If you start spending too much on your land, you don't have enough left to build your home. So other land that we've got close to the 500K mark isn't doing so well. The Building Boost hasn't assisted it, or people would like to buy it at the lower 400 mark, which of course is not surprising. And different types of finance have also become tougher as certain lenders move out of the market. and sit on the sidelines and wait to see what happens. So
Yeah, I've
I'm not
seen
loving
lenders-
it personally.
I've certainly seen lenders get a lot tighter in their lending criteria, and so getting money to do deals is a lot harder. That's definitely something that I've seen several times. So Shish wants to know, would you do anything differently if you were to start again? I think we've kind of covered some of this, but I guess what would you do one thing differently?
I would have a solid plan. A better plan. Hindsight's 2020 though.
Yeah, I think possibly I would have gone bigger earlier. That's probably, and that's easy to say in hindsight when you've seen how the market has panned out. But yeah, I suppose that would be the one thing in hindsight that I wish I had done.
I would say something slightly different. Follow your gut. If you have my husband has a gut feeling about something, and when it's bad, it always turns out bad. So if you have a feeling about something, follow your gut.
Very good.
Yes, for mine, it would have been establishing my serviceability platform before being in full time, because once you're full time in property, unless you've already got a fully established serviceability platform, becomes very hard to be getting money yourself. That's where the joint venturing becomes, quite needed.
Very good. Well, that, folks, is the end of the actual questions. So thank you very much for that. Whoops, I think I've just shared the wrong thing. So hang on 2 secs. Hopefully you guys can see that, not that screen, that's the wrong one. That's what I wanted to show. So once again, I want to hear everybody else's stories and everybody else's feedback as to their experiences and where they are on their journey. So if you do that, propdev.info/feedback. And for those of you who do, I'm going to run a very special session just for you guys, which is a masterclass on no money down deals, which we'll announce in about 2 weeks' time. So anyone interested in doing that, please provide some feedback. I'll put the links into the chat window in a moment. Other than that, we run these Sunday sessions every single Sunday at 5 o'clock Brisbane time. So depending upon where you are in the country, you may have to adjust that for daylight savings and time zones, etc. But 5 o'clock Brisbane time, different topic every single week, and certainly well worth the watch. So make sure you go and like our Facebook page, and you will get the announcements when we go live. We also run 2 Facebook groups. So our Property Developer Network group, where you can ask the community for assistance and questions, and the community will actually try and help you back. And also our development site Deal Hub, where you can do off-market deal transactions. The only deals on there are ones that are not publicly listed. So great place to buy a deal, and great place to flick a deal if you've found one that you think someone else might want to take on. So that said, folks, I want to say a huge thank you to our illustrious panel. So that's Rod, Helen, Al, and Jim. And thank you very much to the audience for all your valuable questions. And we will see you next Sunday for the next Sunday session. Thanks, guys. Bye for now.
See ya.